Iran-EFTA or the Israel War. 7 shocking reveals. For 40 years, Iran built an empire of influence. It was a network of proxies and allies stretching from Lebanon to Yemen, all meant to project power and keep its enemies at bay. The most dramatic changes aren't the ones you saw in the headlines. They are the quiet strategic shifts happening right now, behind the scenes. For years, the network was sold as a unified front, an iron ring of deterrence. The reality was something else entirely. When the conflict exploded, the response from Iran's proxies was shockingly muted. It was the exposure that this wasn't a loyal alliance. It was a collection of self-interested groups who were not willing to risk everything for Tehran. Iran's primary tool for projecting power had been methodically weakened, leaving the regime dangerously exposed when the fight finally came to its own soil. The second shocking reveal is the extent of Iran's diplomatic isolation. Both offered rhetorical support and condemned the attacks, with Russia noting Iran's right to self-defense. But their ability or willingness to intervene was non-existent. Preoccupied with their own challenges, they provided no meaningful shield for Tehran. This stood in stark contrast to the Western powers, who largely supported Israel's right to self-defense. While countries across the Islamic world condemned the Israeli strikes, not one offered material support. The third shocking reveal from the conflict's aftermath is the sudden pivot from this ideology toward desperate pragmatism. Facing crippling economic pressure and profound strategic isolation, some hardliners in Tehran are beginning to sound like dealmakers. Iran is now being forced to be more selective, assessing which groups are worth the cost and risk. This isn't a change of heart. It is a change born of necessity. The ideologues have been forced to recognize that their revolutionary ambitions have led them to the brink, and only a turn toward pragmatism can pull them back. Gulf states like Saudi Arabia, along with others, publicly opposed the strikes, but privately worked to ensure the conflict did not escalate and spill over their borders. We've uncovered 7 of these revelations that are fundamentally reshaping the Middle East. This was the axis of resistance. Then came the direct conflict of June 2025, a brief but brutal confrontation that didn't just crack this empire. It revealed that its very foundations were built on sand. This has triggered a stunning shift toward economic diplomacy. There are now quiet signals of outreach to its Arab neighbors and even back-channel feelers to the United States, all aimed at securing sanctions relief and attracting foreign investment to rebuild. The rigid ideological foreign policy is being replaced by a more cautious, calculated approach. The grand alliances it had touted for years proved to be transactional and brittle, unwilling to be drawn into a direct confrontation. The ceasefire didn't bring peace. Instead, it pulled back the curtain on a series of shocking truths about Iran's real power, its alliances, and its future. Reveal number 1. The axis of resistance was a paper tiger. The first and most stunning reveal of the 2025 conflict is that Iran's feared axis of resistance was far weaker than anyone imagined. Israeli and later, American strikes inflicted devastating losses. But the damage was as much psychological as it was physical. In Lebanon, Hezbollah, long considered the crown jewel of the proxy network, did not join the fight, wary of dragging a fragile nation into another full-blown war. In Yemen, the Houthis launched some missiles, but discovered the hard limits of their power when faced with a concerted military campaign. The shock wasn't that the axis collapsed overnight. Reveal number 2. Iran was diplomatically isolated. When the fighting began, Iran looked to its powerful allies for support. It found only silence and carefully worded statements calling for restraint. Even more telling was the response from Iran's strategic partners, Russia and China. Perhaps most painfully for Iran, its own neighbors adopted a strategy of calculated neutrality. In its moment of greatest need, Iran found it was standing almost completely alone. Reveal number 3. The ideologues became pragmatists for decades. Iranian policy was defined by revolutionary ideology. Death to America, death to Israel. With its proxy strategy in tatters and its military vulnerabilities exposed, Iran is being forced to prioritize survival. This new pragmatism extends to its remaining proxies. The era of unconditional support seems to be over, with reports that financial support to groups like Hezbollah is being suspended. Reveal number 4. The rules of the shadow war were broken. The fourth shocking reveal was the shattering of the unspoken rules of the Iran-Israel conflict. On June 13, 2025, Israel launched a massive direct air campaign against Iran's core military and nuclear facilities at sites like Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. U.S. officials stated the strikes were aimed at eliminating Iran's nuclear weapons program. The attack has dramatically raised the stakes, forcing Tehran to a ceasefire, while simultaneously creating deep anxiety among Gulf Arab states, who fear becoming the battleground for a wider conflict. The 2025 escalation will be remembered not just for the conflict between Iran and Israel, but for the moment the shadow war broke into the open with direct state-on-state strikes. This was a monumental shift. For years, the conflict was a shadow war of assassinations, sabotage, and proxy battles. That red line has now been crossed. The old rules are gone, and a new, more unpredictable era has begun. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and get clear, in-depth analysis on the forces shaping our world, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon. The fifth shocking reveal of the 2025 conflict is that this fortress was made of glass. The campaign didn't just damage infrastructure, it decapitated leadership, killing top IRGC commanders and key nuclear scientists, revealing critical failures in Iran's counterintelligence. Then, on June 22nd, the United States entered the conflict directly, using B-2 stealth bombers to hit hardened nuclear targets that Israeli munitions couldn't reach. The country's prized nuclear program, the centerpiece of its national pride, was severely set back. While U.S. and Israeli intelligence believe the program was set back by years, Iran still possesses the enriched uranium and technical knowledge to eventually rebuild. The regime's narrative of military invincibility, carefully cultivated for over 4 decades, was shattered in a matter of days. This intervention was not aimed at regime change, but at surgically removing what Washington and its allies viewed as an existential threat. Instead, it has created a dangerous and unpredictable power vacuum. Iran's old model of deterrence, using its proxy network to threaten its enemies from afar, is fundamentally broken. The conflict shifted from a shadow war to a direct state-on-state confrontation, a battle Iran clearly lost. The humiliating military failures and exposure of deep vulnerabilities have sent shockwaves through the Iranian political establishment. Owned and cornered Iran remains a threat. Both the US and Israel remain wary of Tehran's potential for asymmetric retaliation, such as attacks on global energy infrastructure or cyber attacks. The vacuum left by the axis of resistance is now the new battleground for influence. The question now is, who or what will rush in to fill it? The decline of the axis of resistance has left a void in places like Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, which could be filled by even more radical actors. This new Middle East is complex and changing faster than ever. The balance of power in the Middle East has been fundamentally altered, but this has not brought stability. It has only started a new, more dangerous and more unpredictable chapter in a decades-long conflict. The region is holding its breath as tense diplomacy continues under the constant shadow of renewed war. The conflict of 2025 did not resolve the Iran problem, a regime left isolated by its so-called friends. A stunning pivot from ideology to pragmatism born from weakness. A new era of direct military strikes. A military fortress revealed to be made of glass. Deep internal fractures threatening the regime itself. And finally, a dangerous new power vacuum that has left the entire region on a knife's edge. It simply replaced a familiar set of dangers with a new, more volatile and uncertain strategic landscape. A visible and intense debate is reportedly raging between two camps to quell dissent and project strength. The regime has also launched a significant internal crackdown, arresting activists, particularly in Kurdish areas. This turn inward shows a leadership that is deeply concerned about social unrest and its own grip on power. The direct conflict may have ended, but it has ignited a new internal battle for the soul of the Islamic Republic. On one side are the hardliners, who demand aggressive retaliation to restore Iran's lost deterrence. On the other is a growing faction of pragmatists who argue that further escalation is suicidal and that negotiation is the only path to save the regime. And I want to hear from you in the comments. What do you believe is the greatest danger that will emerge from this new, more volatile Middle East? Let me know below. Now, for the fifth shocking reveal. Reveal number 5. Iran's fortress was made of glass for years. The Islamic Republic projected an image of immense military strength. It boasted of impenetrable air defenses and an elite officer corps. The strikes demonstrated a stunning ability to operate deep within Iranian airspace, hitting sensitive military sites and nuclear facilities with precision. Iran's most advanced air defense systems proved largely ineffective against the sophisticated attacks. Reveal number 6. Cracks in the regime's facade. The sixth shocking reveal is that the conflict's most significant long-term consequences may not be external, but internal. Publicly, the regime is trying to project a unified front. Privately, however, deep fractures are emerging. This internal conflict is causing a kind of strategic paralysis. Reveal number 7. A new and dangerous power vacuum. The final and perhaps most unsettling reveal is that the weakening of Iran has not led to a more stable Middle East, but this new reality is fraught with risk. The Gulf states, while welcoming a weaker Iran, are now unnerved by a newly assertive Israel and the prospect of being caught in the middle of future conflicts. So, what have we learned? 7 shocking developments in the wake of the 2025 Iran-Israel conflict. A proxy network exposed as a paper tiger. The direct fighting may be over, but its consequences are just beginning to unfold. Iran's power has been checked, but for how long?